Jim, thank you for that. So, so I want to thank everyone that has anything to do with this particular meeting. This is one of the bright spots of the Zoom world out there, and it's kept going. The really good ones keep going, and this is one of the really good ones. And I want to thank a lot of friends that, you know, I very selfishly send out, these flyers basically so that I get a chance to see some of my friends. Yeah, there are some people who'll jump on if I send them the flyer, and I want to thank them for showing up. You're part of my fellowship, and I love all of you. All right, so step 11. Here's what I believe today. I'm sober 35 years. I started seriously working the 12-step program 34 years ago. I claim to be someone with an awakened spirit of the educational variety. It happened slowly over the course of time because I slowly took the steps over the course of time. And what I believe today is alcoholism in all of its monstrous characteristics that we all underestimate is the problem, and consistent spiritual development is the solution on developing, on broadening and deepening our spiritual lives, which there's nothing I don't think more important than that. Listen, if you're an alcoholic, you're in way more trouble than you think you are. I don't care if you're 10 years sober, you're 20 years sober, you're still in way more trouble than you think you are. And the amount of attention and the amount of time put into spiritual growth is never wasted. It's necessary, and it's always beneficial. I want to start with a quick story here. I got 35 minutes, and I'm going to be a little bit all over the place, but there's a point to that. So my story starts with, there's this book dealer. He's a book collector. He buys estate sale books and he sells them. That's his job. And there's this family in Cape Cod who keeps bugging him. They keep bugging him all, you got to come up and see these books. You got to come up and see these books. And and so finally, he goes up there. Finally, he goes up there, and when he walks in, he sees the most extraordinary collection of religious and spiritual works that he's ever seen in one place before. He's blown away, and he's like, "Who?" He's looking through the books. They're all first edition. They're all signed by the author. He's like, "Who lived here?" And they tell him. And the guy that lived there was named Eugene Axman. And what Eugene Axman did for a living was from 1925 until 1965, he was the main religion editor at Harper's Publishing. So, like, Harper's, during that period of time, was the largest publishing company. And this guy was in charge of the religion and spiritual department. So what he would do is he would pick who he wanted to publish. He would edit their work. He would decide what's going to be on the bestseller list. I mean, he basically colored our perspective of modern religion and spirituality in the 20th century. This guy, because of the power he had as an editor. And the guy is really, really interested in what he's seeing. So he starts, they let him go in the house and he's going through all the records. This guy never threw anything away. And he's going through all this documentation. And he finds that this is the guy that published Albert Schweitzer. This is the guy that published Martin Luther King Jr. This is the guy that published Dorothy Day. This is the guy that published Huxley. This is the guy that it just goes on and on and on. All these unbelievably amazing spiritual transformative people of the 20th century, and he starts to find a lot of meditation retreats with this guy. Bill did seances and meditations, and this is the guy that Bill experimented with LSD with, this editor of Harper's. And it's all in this documentation. Now, you can find all this information if you're interested in it. The book's name is God the Bestseller. And it's written by the book dealer that discovered all this stuff. But here's why I'm telling this story. Inherent in all of this that comes out in this book is that Bill Wilson was a deep spiritual seeker. He never stopped. And you know what? He surrounded himself with the absolute pinnacle of spiritualists in the 20th century. Aldous Huxley, Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, these are the people that Bill would hang with. And you don't see any of this in the conference approved literature. He's much too, he's much too humble to start, name dropping and stuff, right? That wasn't like Bill. But what you learn is that Bill never stopped seeking deeper understanding. Now, I just got a chance. There's a brand new movie. You can download it. It's called Bill W. Conscious Contact. Some of you
I'm
have
just
probably
checking in. I'm watching. I'm at the meeting. Uh,
some of you have probably seen this already. But what it is it's all about Bill Wilson's spiritual development. The white light experience up through where he was in 1969 before he died. And in 1969, he started to practice transcendental meditation with a guy who the Maharishi taught. You know what I mean? Like the more I learn about Bill Wilson, the more I understand that he sought through prayer and meditation, and especially the contemplative disciplines, he sought a deeper connection to God. Now, a little bit about me. I started to get out of control in the 70s. I started drinking in like 1969, 1970. By 1972, DUIs, getting killed, coming to in Topeka with one shoe. The whole game was on like by 1972. And I started to calm down. Like I had a period of time where I was really trying to control my alcoholism, really trying to control it, and I did it with an enormous fast times at Ridgemont High. Yeah, I mean that was me. Anyway, that whole time, and I went to college, and I took science fiction and appreciating music and swimming. I took all these things, and I'm wandering around the campus, and I'm starting to get attracted to spiritual books. Okay, some of them were Alan Watts books, Carlos Castaneda books, um, uh, 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 a Narcissus and Goldman, Herman Hesse. I started to move toward these books that were like pop, kind of spiritual type of literature. I found that comforting, and I was heading in that direction. And I believe there was a reason I was heading in that direction. And then alcoholism raised its ugly head and bulldozed down any kind of continued paying attention to spiritual stuff there was until I came to an Alcoholics Anonymous in 1989. Okay. So what I believe today is I believe that as alcoholics, you know what I think we are? I think we're unresolved mystics. Do you know who the mystics are? The mystics are the people that go to the caves in the Himalayas. They go out on the desert and fast for 2 weeks. I mean, they go to the fierce landscapes, and they're driven. They're driven to connection with God, and that's the most important thing in their life. And I think in a way, we're unresolved mystics. We're trying to gain connection to the divine through alcohol, through drugs, through sex, through food, through gambling, through toys. Because that's what I see. I sponsor a lot of people, and that's what I see. Take something out here to bring it in close to make me feel good. When really what I'm craving is I'm craving connection with the divine. I'm craving unity and wholeness of spirit. All right, so let's just say we've done the first 10 steps, because it's always a good idea to do the step before the step you're taking to get full impact of it. You know what I mean? I believe, okay, you come in and you're praying and you're meditating. It's not going to mean anything near what it's going to mean until you do the first 10 steps. And then it's a whole new attitude, a whole new outlook, a whole new experience. Because the first 10 steps prepare you for the life of the spirit. And step 11 moves you into the practice and disciplines that are going to be needed for this life of the spirit, the deep prayer and the deep meditation. Now, here's a cool thing about both of them. Here's a cool thing about all of it. None of us are ever going to get this perfect, and we're never going to finish it. Those are two very cool things. This is a journey. This, our life is a series of days where we put certain experiences into these days. We try to put spiritual living into each day that we live. And the benefit of that becomes more and more apparent as you collect your chips with the Roman numerals on them, how long you've been sober. And what happens with this deep discipline of prayer and meditation is this. Folks, this year has been the best year of my life. And last year was the best year of my life up until this year. And last year was better than the year before. And the year before was better than the year before that. So there is a cumulative experience to be had. There's a depth of experience to be had from the practice of these simple disciplines of step 11. Now, to break step 11 down, we start the day upon awakening. As we move through the day, that's another part of the discipline. And as we retire at night. So when are we practicing these spiritual disciplines? Well, from when we wake up till we go to bed. That's when we're supposed to be applying these spiritual principles. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And the realm of the spirit is broad, it's roomy, it's all inclusive. Okay, I'll say I came into this whole thing with a ton of prejudice. I didn't like meditation because I didn't like, bald people sitting in a lotus position with incense chanting Om. I didn't like prayer because, they made me go to Sunday school. So I come to this with an enormous amount of prejudice and an enormous amount of old ideas. We beg of you to lay aside prejudice. And we're not asking you to believe a certain set of ideas. We're not giving you theology. We're not gonna give you creeds and all that stuff that you have to, you have to believe to be one of us. We're not gonna do that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna give you spiritual exercises that are gonna give you an experience with God. That's all we're gonna give you. That's it. All we're gonna do is get you in touch with a power greater than yourself that will do for you what you cannot do for yourself. We're just going to show you how the power of God can work in you and through you and accomplish the miraculous. That's all. No big deal. So so please pay attention. Pay attention to this stuff. Jump in. Be an enthusiast. Be an enthusiast for this stuff. Now, upon awakening, let's just look at that for a minute. You got to understand that when Bill wrote this, it was 1939, and here's an old idea that I had that lasted for years. I didn't even know it was an old idea. When you said meditation, something Eastern came into my head. Do you understand what I mean? And that's because of the Beatles, brought the Maharishi over. And when you think about meditation retreats and meditation teachers, they're always doing Buddhism and Zen and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's what I thought Bill was talking about. He wasn't talking about that. He was talking about what is known as Christian contemplative practices. And if you read the black part of this particular Upon Awakening, it asks us to review our day. It asks us to think about what's coming at us, what's going to come at us today, to prepare, to ask God to show us, give us the power and the direction to do the right thing today. You know what I mean? And when we retire at night, constructively review the day, constructively review it like you would if you were a businessman constructively reviewing the day at work or whatever. Are there areas that could be improved? Have you made any mistakes that need to be corrected, that help with this mysterious thing called life that confuses us a lot? And people that confuse us a lot. The general idea is, rather than come at this whole thing called life from a foundation of selfishness and self-centeredness and self-seeking and self-consciousness, rather than approach life like that, what we do is we prepare ourselves in such a way that we're going to be more helpful. We're going to be more compassionate. We're going to be more charitable. We're going to develop what is known as a service ethic. And that way, that is the antidote to this toxic self-consciousness that the alcoholic suffers from. That's really when we separate from alcohol, that's what we suffer from. Our head talking to us in a way that is deeply self-conscious and not others conscious or God conscious. So for us to heal as alcoholics, we need to move out of that. We need to move out of the way our mind just wants to kill us. If you're anything like me, you had a brain that wanted to kill you, and you try not to die, doing the things your brain wants you to do. So, so, so moving from that self consciousness to a God consciousness or a spiritual consciousness is the recovery process of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is. That's what's in our literature. That's what's in our book. Now, fellowship is incredibly important. We can't do any of this stuff ourselves. And we need a vital, healthy fellowship for us to be able to approach the spiritual life the way we need to approach it, which is to be helpful, to try to find people to help, to get support, to be supportive. The fellowship is really important. And the service structure is important too. This thing called Alcoholics Anonymous has to survive. And some of the best of us need to be a part of that service structure. If it's in your personality to do so, some of the most recovered and the best of us need to be there and do it. But the recovery program is the basis of everything. In today's Alcoholics Anonymous, you can wander in and you can be allowed to sit in the back row, languishing day after week after month after year. No, we're not the police. You know what I mean? We are a free and open society that shares their experience, their strength, and their hope. And there are no rules. There's no dictators. So you can find your way into Alcoholics Anonymous and do everything in the world but recover. So please understand that, and understand that the recovery process comes from the application of these 12 steps. And that's how we get to a place where we're safe and protected, a place of neutrality. That's where the promises really start to come true. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead of you. No matter what your present circumstances. That's an incredible promise. I got to tell you. So 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 step 11. What do I do? I want to tell you what I do. I get up way early. Somebody said, how do I meditate? I go to work at 7 o'clock. Well, get up at 4 then. You know what I mean? That's like my answer. So I get up between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. And I got to tell you, sometimes it's a half an hour, sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's an hour and a half. And I really try to follow Upon Awakening, the instructions in Upon Awakening. And it's drastic, but it's not difficult. It's not difficult. And I've probably not missed a morning in 30 years. I can honestly say that. You know what I mean? Now, as I go through the day, listen, life hits you, right? Life hits you. And a lot of times, the first thing in your mind, when somebody gets in your face or something goes south at work or whatever, the first thing in your mind isn't, how do I apply spiritual principles to this, right? It's just not because life is coming at you. But more and more we get placed on the plane of inspiration. And what the plane of inspiration is to be inspired and to have intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle you. What intuition is intuition is to know without thinking, to just know, just react the right way. So I have found that over the years, my reaction to all things in life. Now I can get pissed every once in a while. I don't want you to, so something. Well, what did you mean by that, Calvin? What do you really mean by that? Today my reactions are on an intuitive plane. I handle situations really well. People think I know what I'm doing. you know, so it's got to be working. It's got to be working. Now, prayer. Uh, the book basically tells us this. It says pray all the time. That's what it says. Now, can any of us do that? It says these are thoughts which must go with us constantly. Thy will, not mine, be done. That's a thought that must go with you constantly. What is constantly? It's almost pretty much. You know what I mean? So we're supposed to be God conscious. So when we pause, when agitated or doubtful, and we ask for the right thought or inspiration, these are things that we need to practice as disciplines. And as we become disciplined at them, guess what? Not only do we get a lot better at this thing called life, but we get a lot more appreciation for this thing called life. I need to tell you that today I love life. I really do. And the externals out there's bankruptcies, there's lost jobs, there's people that die on you, the close people that die on you and inconvenience you like that. There's all kinds of things that happen, to you. And those things are external now to me. And it doesn't mean I don't pay attention to them or I don't care about them. It means I'm not emotionally wrapped up in them. I can I can I can I can handle these things appropriately without making them about me. Someone would die back in the day, and I'd be like, "Some bitch died on me." Now I'm gonna have to put on a suit and go to a wake. I hate wakes. Like today, I can appreciate the the general expectations and mores of life and I can appreciate them. I can go to churches, I can go to funerals, I can go to board meetings. And you know what? I am absolutely fine. And I handle them all appropriately. And it's rare that I get wrapped up in something that's going to emotionally mess me up, that's going to put me into depression, that's going to give me anxiety, it's going to put me into self-fear, that's going to give me shame, guilt, or remorse. Incredibly rare today. And that is a gift of the application of this particular step. Now, Bill was a seeker. I love Bill Wilson because I'm a seeker too. You want to see my book library? You know, I am forever reading spiritual literature. It's actually recommended. Some ask some priests, ministers, or rabbis for some suggestions. Right? I don't need suggestions. Don't send me a book, please. I've got an on deck pile that's going to last me 4 years. I don't need any help. But I dig into this spiritual stuff. I dig into this spiritual stuff. And here's what I've learned. If I read a spiritual book, it will make me feel all warm and fuzzy, and it'll give me a real good feeling. And that feeling will probably wear off. If I read a spiritual book and actually apply the actions in that book, I get lasting results. So if you're somebody that goes to big book studies just to study, or you read the book just to read, understand that that's going to make you all warm and fuzzy. But the experience is there's not going to be no transformational quality to that. You have to actually do what it says to do. So please understand. I learned that the hard way. I read every book. I read the Course in Miracles. You ever read the Course in Miracles? It's like 7,000 pages long, and it's got all this stuff that it's impossible even to do. I went the Course in. I read it all. I read the Joy of Resentment. How to win friends and influence people through tyranny. I read every self-help book and every spiritual book that you've ever heard. And I'll tell you what has made a real impact in my life. The book Alcoholics Anonymous, because I've really, really made an effort to apply the things that it tells me to apply. And I'm going to end now. I'm going to tell one quick story, and then I'm going to end. This is a friend of mine, and I'm robbing the story, but he couldn't care less. He goes to one of our great Alcoholics Anonymous guys. He's at the big meeting now, but this guy was known far and wide as like such a great meditator. And he went up to this guy and he goes, I'd like you to give me some help with meditation. I'm having some trouble. How do you meditate? And he goes, well, that's really my problem. I haven't really been able to get started. And that guy goes, oh, ha, 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 ha. You don't have problems. You don't have problems with meditation. You have problems with commitment. And a lot of times, folks, that's what we have. We have problems with commitment. So get committed or be committed. I'll leave you with that, and that's all I got for tonight. Okay.
You talk. Ah, Anthony, come on in.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. It's always good to hear you. Kind of one thing that kind of struck me too is like living for me, step 11, right? It's kind of like living in, for me, the whole group is living in 10, 11, and 12. And I'd say one thing for me is, you get to steps 10, 11, and 12, and there's no real watermark for if you're doing good, right? You're doing much better than when you were. You're applying these spiritual principles, and then you have new sponsees that'll call you, and you'll hear their stories. And when you get off the phone with them, I kind of seem like Jesus Christ. But then when we hear guys like you or Howard or some other people out there, that's kind of the watermark on, am I actually growing or am I just trying to maintain? Is there any kind of feedback or ways to see how your spiritual growth is going throughout this progress? I use other things such as, if I'm starting to living resentment, like the bewilderments, if those are coming in my life, those are kind of like canaries in the coal mine. But what are some other things you could do to make sure that we're actually really progressing, and I'm not just gaslighting myself to say, look at me, I'm being such a good guy when my motives are off.
I don't know that there's a perfect answer to that. All I would say is continued application of these principles will bring about continued improvement in one's spiritual and emotional life. I'm going to say none of us are going to be perfect at it, but we get the benefit of our energy and our application. We'll get that benefit, and we also have to live out there in the real world. We don't live in a spiritual make believe. There's some real things that'll happen, but you will see over the course of time in particular steps.
And thank you, Chris. My friend Howard. Howard, please come in.
I, my name is Howard, even I am an alcoholic. My first question really is, how the hell did I get put in a category with Chris by Anthony? How did I somehow get put in that category? Because I want to do that. I want to do that. Thank you so much. Whenever you speak, I always take notes about what you speak, what you say, and over and over, there are certain things that you are always driving home. This toxic self-consciousness, and how you know it. After 24 years in recovery and going through several relapses, I finally did realize that there were four things that I needed to do that I wasn't doing. And you put it in perspective for me, which is probably why I asked you to sponsor me. But that I needed to first develop this connection with our society, this fellowship, develop a real connection with it, not just, going to meetings and going bowling together and eating stale donuts and nonsense, but developing a relationship in this society and then connecting with somebody, finding somebody in that group to connect with, then take directions from that person. And here's where it got interesting. Here's the one thing that keeps repeating over and over when you share is get busy, get committed, get busy, stay busy, find other people to get busy. It's like a mantra over and over and over again. Get busy, stay busy, get other people busy. I love your comment about Eastern meditation. I tried that and it didn't work for me, but for another reason. The Hare Krishnas with the gowns and the finger symbols and the schwantz on their head. That didn't work for me because I believe God creates us in his own image. And I know he wouldn't wear his hair like that. So that didn't work for me. But there are elements of that did. And I had to be open to it. And I guess that what the question is really, how do you get open to something like that? How do you, when you think you've got that, when you think you understand that, when you think you've got a discipline, I'm wrapped up with the past, things that haven't happened yet in the future, and I'm just all knotted up in it. How do you realize how do you filter that out?
Thank you, Howard.
One of my spiritual heroes used to wake up every morning and say, wow, what will I get to let go of today? With a really, really excited type of perspective. What do I get to let go of? The spiritual life is way more about discarding than it is about acquiring. So the Buddhists used to call it, well, the Buddhists call it a beginner's mind. The book Alcoholics calls it an open mind. And I think the only way we can be open-minded is is understanding that we're alcoholic and not wanting to go back to the way it was. You know what I mean? So just read a lot, learn a lot, listen to a lot of people, and try to see what you can learn and what you can let go of. That would be the best way I would answer that question.
Thank you, Chris. Lola, do you mind turning on your camera to come in?
Yeah, I do. I'd rather keep my picture up. Sorry, I'm in my PJs.
Okay,
Anyway,
come on.
Chris, great talk. Really loved it. One of the best talks I've heard in a really long time. Two questions about meditation. One, um, do you experience this deep sense of happiness, this kind of joy, this kind of bliss through life, regardless of what life brings you as a result of meditation? And can you compare your meditative life with your prior to meditation life?
So I'll just tell you this. I'll be driving on the way to work and I'll see the sun coming up and I'll have an overwhelming sense of gratitude and I will just be all about the business of thanking God. And and yes, I believe that I opened myself up to having experiences like that through becoming open-minded about spiritual practices and applying them. And it says prayer. The thing that was read for might say meditation doesn't work. You do it enough, and you're going to see a change. And that's the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous. We want you to have your own experience. We offer you the tools to have an unbelievably cool experience, I'm not saying that I'm 100% spiritually sound or emotionally sound, but I'm 99%. I'm 99%. I claim spiritual progress, not perfection, and it's so much better than it was. Oh my God. I was suicidal in the late 80s, so does this way of life work? Yes, it does. And find your own path, find your own experience, find your own teachers. There's wonderful teachers out there. You'll know the ones you need to pay attention to. You'll know inside, and grab everything you can out of this experience called life. I believe I am a biological organism with consciousness that they still don't understand. Consciousness, being able to think, having a spiritual experience on this wonderful planet that God made for us as a playground. Go play with all the rest of the other boys and girls and learn how to be a good kid. And and that's what I'm doing. you know, and I can't tell you how cool this is, how cool this experience is. And I was suicidal in the 80s, So over the course of time, this thing works. An inward rearrangement in our attitude and outlook on life. That's what we get. And I'm real grateful for that. Listen, I never answer the questions correctly. I go on tangents. That's just you got to know that when you ask me a question.
Chris, but we love your answers. Mike B, please come on in.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Alcoholic. Thank you, Chris. That was wonderful. My question is, over the years, let's say about 4 years ago, I finally stopped using the big book as a coaster and started reading it and started studying it and I was forced to do that by getting sponsees. And I've heard the big book referred to as a spiritual kindergarten. And I feel like I've got so much. You mentioned these books, and then I hear you going to work. I hear you doing this and doing that. Don't tell me to get up at 3 a.m., but tell me how you find time to do that. And is there a first grade book that you would recommend for me? Thank you.
You're muted, Chris.
I'm sorry. So you're able to pack more into the stream of life when you're living a spiritual life. So I listen. I also this weekend, I'm going to be driving out to Pennsylvania for a workshop. Sunday night I'm driving down to the shore for an anniversary. My AA life is full. My family life is full. I got grandkids that come over all the time. Like we got 3 dogs, fish, birds. I work full time. I'm going to be 79. I'm 69 next month. I'm going to be 69 next month, and I work full time, and I love it. And I plan on working full time for a much longer period of time. But I can still do my favorite thing. You want to know what my favorite thing is? Nothing. I still got a lot of time to do nothing. I really do. So all I would say is the prerequisite to try to answer the question, the prerequisite is the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you've done you have to do a fearless and thorough moral inventory. You got to share it with somebody. You got to understand God's gonna fix it, and you just got to put yourself in the right atmosphere. Got to put a list of people and institutions that you've harmed. You absolutely have to go back and make direct amends to all of them. Then you got to put the disciplines of step 10 and 11 to practice, and then you have to start working with other people and taking other people through the steps. When you've done that, the other books are going to be more meaningful to you, and I'm not going to tell you what books to go. There's an inward direction that we have. We go to the bookstore, online, and we just start looking, and some pique your interest, and it may not pique my interest. Follow your own path with the additional spiritual literature. I've done a lot of comparative religious studies. I think the early Hindu texts are unbelievable. I think the Bhagavad Gita is unbelievable. I think Buddhism is crazy cool. Zen is it's just but the main thing I've studied for 25 years is first century Christianity. I've studied it at such a depth that I probably understand more than most ministers. My thinking. It informs my vocabulary. It informs the way I think. But I always have to go back to the prerequisite. The prerequisite for my survival from alcoholism is the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I've sponsored priests. You can go way into left field with this stuff without having the spiritual foundation that you need, and you can die drunk and awful spiritual. You know what I mean? So again, I'm terrible at answering questions.
You're great at answering questions, and I love you, Chris. So I want to just admit this, that we are not going to have time to get to all the hands, and it's always a heartbreak for me. Raquel, my friend, you are up next.
I unmuted before time. My name is Raquel and I'm an alcoholic. I know you're not good in answering questions, and I don't care. I'm also going to ask questions. So, in this consistent spiritual development that we have, in this amazing journey that we walk, that we suddenly realize that the craving and the longing is for the presence and the connection with the divine, right? What would you tell people who feel that they don't find that connection, or that they see the glimpses, which I think we all do? We have the glimpses of that beautiful connection, but that feel like, oh, now I'm disconnected. Oh, now I don't feel the connection. What kind of encouragement or words would you give the people who suddenly feel disconnected?
It's so all of us are going to go through periods of time where we think, man, I should be doing better than I am now. None of this stuff seems to be working, right? It's as old as mankind himself. There's some wonderful spiritual books that highlight that. The Dark Night of the Soul, the 7-Story Staircase, the Cloud of Unknowing. These are all, ancient texts that have to do with mystics who lost their connection to God, and they didn't know what they were doing. all I can say is the most important word in Alcoholics Anonymous, I think, is consistency. We don't give up on these spiritual principles or practices. We don't give up on going to meetings. We don't give up on working with others. We don't give up on the step work. We don't give up on being of service, no matter what. And if we do that, we're gonna get through those. And some of us are burdened with minds. We outthink a lot of things. And if we're just consistent with all this stuff, we're gonna. I'm telling you, we're gonna be fine. I just know we're. Whenever I see a relapse, I see an inconsistency. I see it. If I ask enough questions, I'm going to find an inconsistency. Someone let up on the course of spiritual action and rested on their laurels in one way or another. You know, so do you want to survive this thing, and you want to have a life of purpose and enjoyment? Develop an ironclad consistency. In the early days, I got sponsees in the early days. I'd make them put a wall calendar up. Put an X for every meeting you go to, put an X for every time you call somebody, put down the page numbers of the books that you read, tell me, put forward in the future when you're going to be done with your 4-step, lay it all out on a goddamn calendar, because we can just be so nutty. And start to develop a spirituality. And again, that doesn't answer your question at all. It's great to see you, Raquel.
So, my friends, I'm sad to say we have come to the end of our time. Maya, I hit you in the chat. Lola, I'm sorry we didn't get to your second question. And Matt, I'm really glad you put your hand up. Please put your hand up early next week. And in the chat is our speaker for next week, who is Ian out of New Jersey, who's